General, thanks for your time. For decades, our own strategic doctrine has, frankly, gotten the orcs wrong. We've always called them a chaotic, disorganized threat. A mindless green tide. Well, this logistical explainer is going to challenge that assumption head-on. We're going to analyze their society not as some random mob, but as a hostile and, let's be honest, brutally efficient system.
So our objective today is to really peel back the layers of what looks like total anarchy and get a look at the actual mechanics of the orc war machine. We're going to break down how it recruits, how it produces, and how it keeps itself going through a system that, on the surface, looks like it's designed to just self-destruct. The key thing to grasp here is that what looks like chaos to us is actually a perfectly functioning, biologically engineered system doing exactly what it was made to do. All right, let's just get right into it, because this is the big question. The paradox that has tied our analysts in knots for years. You've got an entire species that is hardwired, from birth, for combat. They actually reject any labor that doesn't involve some kind of violence. So, who's mining the ore? Who's forging the guns? Who's hauling the ammo? How does an army that is only an army even support itself? The answer isn't in their choices, General. It's in their biology. To solve this huge personnel problem, the creators of the orcs, that ancient race we call the Old Ones, they didn't bother creating a culture or a government. No, they created a biological caste system. They literally hard-coded the solution right into the orc DNA. This ensures that the war machine would always have every part it needed, whether those parts actually wanted to do their jobs or not. And this, right here, this is the foundational principle of everything: genetic programming. See, an orc doesn't decide to become a mechanic or a surgeon. It literally sprouts from the ground with all that knowledge already rattling around in its head. The urge to build, or to cut, or to fight, it's an instinct for them, as powerful as hunger. There's no such thing as a career path. There's only biological destiny. And what does that do? It completely removes the massive logistical headache of training and specialization. So, here's the crucial breakdown. The main orc warrior caste, they're basically allergic to manual labor. I'm not kidding. It literally causes them physical frustration and rage. To get around this, the Old Ones came up with this brilliant two-tiered solution. First, they engineered a whole subspecies, the Gretchin, specifically for all the grunt work. They're the true labor force. And second, specific castes of orcs are just born with the instincts to manage that labor force. These are your handlers, your brewers, your specialists. They're the real backbone of the whole orc industrial machine. Okay, so let's see how this biological solution actually plays out in practice. We're going to dive into some case studies now, analyzing the operational realities for the core production and labor units. And this, General, is where you start to see just how brutally efficient this whole model really is. So our first case study is the run herd. The easiest way to think of these guys is as the floor managers and foremen of the entire orc economy. Their one job is to manage the Gretchin workforce. We're talking millions of these small, panicky creatures who do every single non-combat task required to keep the war machine chugging along. Now, what's really fascinating here is the risk-reward calculation. Because, well, there is no reward. A runt herd's entire existence is one giant occupational hazard. They're genetically programmed to try and corral a workforce that is prone to stampedes, all while operating machinery that just regularly explodes. They get all the blame from their superiors, which usually takes the form of a beating, and they get trampled, burned, and even looted by their own kind if they ever show a moment of weakness. But their purpose in the system is absolutely critical. They are the disposable buffer that makes sure the work gets done, and they protect the more valuable specialists from all the chaos on the factory floor.
All right, let's move on to the next critical role, the brewer. Now, in our armies, alcohol is a morale booster. In the orc ecosystem, it's basically a piece of critical military hardware. See, this fungus beer they make, it fuels the aggression that in turn generates their collective psychic field, the Wa. And that's what makes their completely unstable technology actually function. So, no beer, no Wa. No Wa, no war. It's that simple.
6 months. That number you see there, that's the average operational lifespan for a brewer. Just 6 months. The job involves hauling these incredibly heavy barrels, mixing volatile ingredients, working near open flames in giant vats of boiling liquid, all while surrounded by their customer base, violent, drunk orcs. The attrition rate is frankly staggering.
And this quote just perfectly illustrates the system's perverse efficiency. Casualties aren't just acceptable, they're recycled. A brewer who slips and falls into a vat isn't a loss. They're an ingredient in the next batch. The war boss might even compliment the brew for being extra meaty. The genetic compulsion to brew is so strong that the other brewers will just watch this happen and then get right back to work, maybe stirring a new batch with their one good arm. Nothing is wasted.
Okay, our final production case study is the mech's assistant. Orc mechanics, or mechs as they're called, are the engineers. They're the ones building the guns, the vehicles, the walkers, all from scrap metal. They have this instinctive genius for engineering, but absolutely zero concept of safety protocols. So to get anything done, they require an assistant, basically an expendable set of hands to do all the really dangerous stuff.
And this workflow, this is a typical day for them. The assistant's role is to directly interface with danger. You could almost call them a living diagnostic tool. You see, if an assistant gets electrocuted, the mech learns that that particular wire is live. If they get vaporized by an explosion, well, the mech learns that was probably a bad button to push. And that brings us to the final step. Upon death, the assistant's bionics, any useful parts, are just stripped and tossed into the scrap pile. Orc R&D is literally fueled by a constant churn of fatal trial and error.
So, we've seen how the system handles production. Now we're going to look at how it manages its most unique and, frankly, most hazardous personnel. These aren't your typical laborers. These are high-value, high-risk assets that require specialized and often lethal handling protocols.
First up, the Weird Boy. This is an Orc psyker, a living conduit for the Army's collective Wa energy. On paper, their assigned duty is to channel all that energy into devastating psychic attacks. The reality? They are a completely unstable psychic reactor that's on the verge of meltdown at all times. So the job of the Weird Boy Minder is simple. Stand next to this walking apocalypse and try to aim the inevitable explosion at the enemy. It's less of a command role and more of a hazardous containment protocol for one single, completely expendable soldier.
Next, we're going to examine a role that is absolutely crucial for maintaining the Orc social hierarchy, the pit fighter. In a society where might literally makes right, the fighting pits are their primary institution for settling disputes, weeding out the weak, and providing mass entertainment. It's their version of a judiciary and a gladiatorial arena, all rolled into one.
And this timeline just shows you that the job is relentless, it's attritional, and worst of all, for an Orc, there's no glory in it. These aren't grand battlefield victories. They are just repetitive, ugly brawls for the entertainment of others. But this constant fighting serves a vital purpose for the system. It reinforces the command structure, it resolves resource disputes without disrupting the whole army, and it makes sure that only the strongest individuals actually hold any position of power. The fighters themselves, they're just a grist for this mill.
Our final special unit analysis isn't really a job, but more a state of being, the Pain Boy's patient. Pain Boys are the Orc surgeons, and they are hardwired with this irresistible urge to cut, to experiment, and to improve their fellow Orcs. Their patients are any unlucky soldier who gets injured, or, to be honest, just happens to be standing a little too close when the Pain Boy gets an idea.
Now, what's really interesting here is how they define success. A 25% chance of coming out mostly functional is the absolute best-case scenario. Nearly half of all their procedures are simply called learning experiences, which is, fatal for the patient, but very educational for the Pain Boy. This is how their medical science advances, through a continuous stream of battlefield casualties that provides them with infinite test subjects. Progress for them is achieved through catastrophic failure.
All right, let's put all these case studies together for our final assessment. Now that we've analyzed the key logistical roles, we can really evaluate the overall efficacy of the Orc societal system based on its own internal logic and its own objectives.
This chart, General, this summarizes their entire doctrine. The whole system is optimized for one single goal, the perpetuation of war. Everything, from production speed to resource allocation, is secondary to that prime directive. And personnel safety, as you can see, it's not a rounding error. It is a deliberate and functionally irrelevant metric. The system simply does not care about losses.
And this is probably the most critical takeaway from this entire briefing. This isn't some recent development or a flawed cultural model that's going to change. This is a biological system, and it is functioning exactly as its creators designed it millions of years ago. It is stable, it is unchanging, it doesn't evolve or reform, because from its perspective, it is already a perfect, self-sustaining engine of conflict.
So to conclude our analysis, we have to stop looking at the Orc system as broken. It is not. It is working perfectly.
The staggering casualty rates we see among their production and support staff are not a weakness that we can exploit, they are a feature of the system's design. It's a wasteful, horrifyingly dangerous system, yes, but it achieves its sole objective with near-perfect success. It is built to last, and it is built for one thing: war.
I'll leave you with this final thought, General. We are facing a logistical model that has completely divorced capability from conservation. It has no sentiment, no concern for the individual, only total, absolute dedication to its function. The question for our strategists then becomes, how do you defeat an enemy whose greatest weakness, its total disregard for its own life, is also the very source of its greatest strength? Thank you.